for Jeanette and Dr. White. So let's get right to both of them live for this talking circle. They're going to be joined by Sandra Wilson. She is the Chief Equity, Diversion, and Inclusion Officer for Cascadia Behavioral Healthcare. I do want to remind you that these talking circles, they are based on equity. They're supposed to be between participants, and it is a balance of power. No one has power over the other person. So please feel free to keep continuing to submit those questions. Let's begin the talking circle.
Good morning, everyone. So happy to be here coming from Portland, Oregon this morning. Welcome to our talking circle. So we'll get right on our questions. Dr. White, this one is for you.
Okay.
It's from Kelly, and Kelly says, I cannot sleep. I get up to pee 4 to 6 times a night. I don't drink caffeine, take drugs, or smoke. I have been to urologists. I have had a sleep study, and they haven't found anything. I sleep in a cool, dark room. I take melatonin. I also exercise 3 to 4 times a week. My doctors are baffled. Any suggestions?
Oh, that's a tough one. I know the reason that I end up peeing at night is because sometimes I tend to not drink during the day, and I drink a lot of my fluids later in the evening.
Yeah.
And so then what happens is that I'm thirsty at night because I didn't drink all day. And then I get into this weird cycle of drinking before I go to bed, then having to wake up to go to pee. And then when I go to pee, I drink some more because I'm thirsty. So it's really hard for me to say, you said doctors are baffled. So, I'm not going to be like the super expert here, but given that they haven't found a biological reason, that might be what has happened. And like I said, that has happened for me, that I get into this weird cycle. And my kid will tell me, she'll be like, I don't think you drink enough today. Like, I haven't seen you drinking. And then what happens around 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, I start drinking too much. I know that I'm doing it, but at that point, I'm just thirsty. And so we get into this weird cycle. So maybe if you can drink less fluids at night, like right before you go to bed, maybe give yourself an hour and then go to bed, you won't necessarily be thirsty. It'll just be changing the pattern of your sleep, and maybe that can help. I don't know of any herbal ways to control that, so I'm not sure what other advice to give. But that, like I say, that's happened to me, especially in Jamaica, where it's really hot, and then I just get into this weird cycle of drinking water and then having to get up to pee all night. So.
Okay, thank you for that. Jeanette, I'm going to direct the next question to you.
All right.
You spoke so eloquently about starting from rock bottom. People often underestimate just how courageous and resilient they can be. What advice would you offer to those people who just have difficulty finding that strength?
Speaking from a personal perspective, I have gone through so much pain that I realize that I continue to give the people who hurt me power when I don't forgive, and when I don't forgive myself. And so it was a very hard journey for me to actually pick myself up and to move on, because I was not moving on, really. I was still giving people power over me, over my life, when really they hurt me, yes, but they've moved on with their lives. They're having a good time, but I'm here crying about things that happened a few years ago. I continue to hurt myself when I don't forgive them and when I don't forgive myself. And so the journey really begins when you start to forgive yourself and you start to forgive them. Because I did this thing where I would say I forgive you with my mouth, but my heart was saying otherwise. And so because my heart was saying otherwise, that really shows that I really haven't forgiven them, and I haven't forgiven myself also. And so the journey does begin when you say, I'm forgiving you, and I'm letting go of this pain, of this hurt. I'm no longer going to carry it with me because it doesn't do me any good. And so I'm going to push that in the past, and I'm going to look forward. I'm going to continue to live my life because your life is worthy. And I realized that the journey of picking yourself up from rock bottom really does begin when you start to forgive.
Thank you. This one is for both of you. I would ask Ruth, if you would answer this question first.
Okay.
You know, in the face of adversity and setbacks, how do you keep sight of what is actually important and move toward resilience?
That's a very good question. For me, it's, my friends often say that it's really not that simple, and I say everyone is different, but for me, I always think about if I was dying tomorrow, what would I have wished that I had done that day, right? So there's certain things to me, like I'm picky about my sink in my bathroom, and I don't like dishes in the sink, right? And in the kitchen. But is that going to be my priority for that day, right? Like, if my house isn't perfect, or if I take one more day to answer an email? So we live in a society where we've been taught that somehow, any contact with us requires us to respond right away. And it doesn't. I tell people literally this thing has an off
Yes.
button. Like, it has a do not disturb. Actually, what often happens to me is I do things like this. I put it on do not disturb and I forget about it all day, right? Because I forget to take it off do not disturb. But we have this sense that everything's an emergency. And I joke with my students that I'm not a cardiac surgeon. And so nobody's going to die if I don't respond to something the next day. So I focus on the things that, one, will bring me joy. So, and there are times that if I'm just tired, I just literally check out. And it might, for some people, they will say, you know, we emailed you yesterday, but you start to realize that so I used to go off the grid a lot. I don't do it as much anymore, but I used to go hiking in the Olympic Mountains or in the Cascades. You know what? When I'm hiking, there's no cell service. So I really can't if I want to. I go sailing, and it used to be the same thing. I had no cell service out on the Pacific in the Bay. So I think there's a way to start to think about that you come first, right? That if you're not taken care of, you can't do the other things. So if you're running on empty, you need to fill up the tank, right? Because you would never drive a car on empty. And if you don't maintain a car, it's going to break down. And our bodies are the same, because that's how I know I ended up in the hospital. And when I took a totally different attitude towards life, where I said, you know what? I could write another book, I could write another paper, but do I really need to do that right now? Or can I just take a break? It's the same thing with deciding, are you going to skip a meal? Well, if you skip a meal, how's that going to make you, like, are you going to have mental clarity? Are you going to have the energy that you need? And so really focus on, at some point in your life, and I think as we get older, we get better at this, is to figure out what your values are. Know what's important to you. And it doesn't have to be the same as what's important to someone else. For me, I literally have to get outside every couple of days. And the air has been horrible in the Bay Area. It's been super bad. But staying in a house with no air conditioning, closing the windows, closing the doors, day 2, I was starting to be like, okay, we've been locked in the house with Corona, but at least I could go outside. So yes, I went outside, might have not been the best, but for me, mental health wise, I need to get outside. So my roommate, we're both in public health, she's like, you really want to breathe that air? I said, that's better for me than staying inside. So we all need to know what our priorities are, contacting family members, or, your yoga practice, as we saw earlier, a faith practice, right? If that's important to you. So I think we have to take time in our lives to really know what's important for us and what our values are, so that when we end up in those moments where we have to choose in terms of resilience, and again, with resilience, sleep, 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 sleep. I mean, there are so many, people don't realize that more accidents are caused by people with lack of sleep than alcohol. And so that's a restorative practice. And whatever you can do to improve your sleep will really improve your mood. I tell people we're really just like the 2-year-old toddler. We're just grown-ups. That's all it is. We have the same reaction to not having sleep, where we're like cranky and, your brain can't work. So really focus on what it is that you need in that moment. But also it really depends on who you are and what you need for you. So take that time for yourself to know what that is, so that in those moments of crisis, you can find the things that give you peace and joy, focus on those things, and let some of the other stuff go.
And Jeanette, the same question for you. In the face of adversity and setbacks, how do you keep sight of what is actually important and move toward resilience?
Wow, Ruth really said a lot of things that I'm just learning also. Being an older sibling and having a lot of responsibilities and always trying to be perfect and never disappointing people. I have never really understood what I liked. I've never took the time to discover what makes me happy, things that I can do on my free time. I've never really discovered that until just now. I'm like now starting to do some self-care, starting to learn the things that I enjoy doing, things that I'm really good at, things that I spend most of my time with. Like I never really had the opportunity to do that. And I think that's the most important thing, because we can take care of other people, but what about us? What about your happiness? What about your joy? If you die tomorrow, will you say that you lived a good life? Because yes, it's important to look after your family and the things, your work, your responsibilities. Good to do that, but if you die, they can replace you at your work. If you die, they can just give you a replacement. And so I realized that I need to focus more on things that I enjoy doing, things that make me happy, things that I'm good at. And so I'm now just starting to discover that, and the advice that I can give to anyone is just really take the time that you need to learn yourself, discover who you are, discover what you like, discover what you're good at, discover the things that you enjoy doing, things that spark your life. That's what I can say. That's what I'm doing. And I'm not an expert at this, but I can say that I'm trying, and that's all that counts.
Absolutely. This next question comes from Phoebe, and Phoebe asks or says, I'm my daughter's caretaker. She's 21, and I'm constantly working on myself. I suffer with mental health issues myself, and sometimes I feel so lost when trying to help her. Any suggestions?
Okay. So as a social worker, I'm going to come from that perspective. And what I would say is that, again, try to carve out a 15 minutes, 20 minutes, a time where it's just about you. And it can be something, right now there's this whole crave around, these coloring books, where it's just a distraction, where maybe she's busy doing something and you take that 20 minutes to just zone out, to find a place of zen where you can, maybe if you're knitting or you crochet or you do, scrapbooking. I know people don't put together scrapbooks anymore because they have stuff on their phone, but do whatever it is to get those, pictures off the phone and into an album, or maybe paint, whatever it is. If you can find something that brings you joy for a few moments every day, then that's an amazing thing. I also would suggest that you both together find something to do that brings you both joy. So you might be taking care of her, but is it possible, and I don't know the situation, but is it possible for you to find a mindfulness practice that you both can do together, a breath exercise that you can both do together, so that you both benefit from an opportunity to find peace during the day? But I do believe that you have to find something restorative, something that gives you peace and joy, so that, like I always tell people, you can't be on empty all the time, right? If you're pouring into somebody else, you have to have something to pour. And so if you're on empty, it's really hard for you to give. But just because you're a caregiver all the time doesn't mean that you can't find some joy in the day for yourself. And that's what I would say to you. And I tell people, you can start with 5 minutes, and then you go to 10, and then you go to 15. You can structure your day in a way that gives you that moment. Maybe you wake up 10 minutes earlier to find a way to meditate or to do something mindful that calms you down and centers you during the day.
Jeanette, do you have any thoughts about that?
I mean, I don't have any experience with that, but I can say that you really do need to care for yourself before you care for other people. You have an important role, and it takes a lot out of you, but you always have to remember yourself too. And I think that Ruth said that discovering things that you both enjoy, that way you are also getting a lot of it too. So I can just say don't forget about yourself as you're taking care of other people.
Beautiful. This next question comes from Sandra, and Sandra says, When the pain of hundreds of years of violence against Black people has not been acknowledged and continues, how do we move forward personally when the preponderance of evidence tells me my life doesn't matter?
Ooh,
That's heavy.
that's heavy. And I want to say, you know, part of the struggle is to not think about what other people think about your life. To think about your life and how you value your life. I will say that one of the gifts my dad gave us, my dad, I was born in England of Jamaican immigrant parents, and my mom moved to Canada following her sisters who were nurses, because nurses were being recruited. So first they, you know, they held up the NHS in the UK, and then they went to Canada. And my dad decided that he didn't want his kids raised in a white majority. So he packed us up. My mom was like, where are you going with the kids? And we went back to Jamaica, and she stayed to get her residency in Canada. And growing up in a Black majority, I never centered white people. So my life's value had nothing to do with white people. What I do had nothing to do with white people. What I thought had nothing to do with white people. And I can't give that gift to somebody who was never raised in a Black majority where everybody looked like them, teachers, your friends, the prime minister, the leader of the country, everybody looked like you. You were athletes, whatever you did, it was around. You never really thought about white people. Like for me, white people were tourists. Like, yeah, we had native white people, but they didn't have, you know, more power over us, and they weren't running the world. And so all I can say is to start to think about why you think your life doesn't matter, because somebody else's perception and the violence that is supported societally by some sectors in our society is not the way we want to, that's not the point of reference we want to use about whether we have value or not. I tell people the same thing about a partner, right? If a partner leaves you, it doesn't mean you don't have value. If your parents reject you, it doesn't mean you don't have value. And I think it's really important for you to focus on the fact that we all have value. And we all, you know what my dad said to me, and it's a gift also that he gave me that I try to share with people. He said, you're as good as any and better than many. And he raised me that way. And he said, nobody's better than, he's like, the queen goes to the bathroom, okay? So she's queen only by virtue of birth. There's nothing that is special about her. There's nothing that's, you know, uniquely makes her more powerful, makes her more ready to rule, I don't know how many countries in the Commonwealth, right? And so we have to have intrinsic value of our own lives. I also would highly suggest to stay off the media visuals so that you're not traumatizing yourself all the time. There's some things well, I'm lucky, I don't have a TV, so I don't watch TV news, right? What I do is I get the Washington Post and New York Times in my inbox. So I see the headlines. They're not gonna have the videos. I'm not gonna look at the pictures. If it says somebody got killed, I will just say, okay, but I'm not gonna look at it because it's hard to get those things out of you. Once they've come into you, you're going to have nightmares. You're going to think about it all the time. It's hard not to, right? And this is why, and there, you know, I mentioned in my talk that humans have a negativity bias. And what that means is that we have to have, on average, the research has shown around 4 positive events to cancel out a negative one. So how are we going to counteract that negative experience? And news is not about good news, right? There's no news reports that's full of good news. In fact, they call it the human interest story because that's the good news, right? So you have to find a way to fill up on yourself, to find ways to celebrate Black joy. One of the things they have in Oakland, which I just think is so Oaklandish, is a Black joy parade. Literally a parade for Black people to just be joyful in the streets. And I believe when I do racial healing workshops, I believe in finding ways to celebrate that which is joyful for you. Is it jazz? Is it soul food? Is it our history? Is it books that people wrote? Is it visual? Is it art? Is it sculpture? Find a way to celebrate the power of who we are. Every culture has art and music and gifts for the world. And so there's nobody is less valued. You are valued and you have value, and you should value yourself regardless, and in spite of what other people might think of you. And I think it's why sometimes when people tell me, maybe something I saw or experienced was racist, I give everyone the benefit of the doubt. Like, that's where I start. I give grace to people. I give patience to people, because what I also know is most people aren't thinking about me. They are just having, these white people are having just as many problems as I do. They're not thinking about me. And in Jamaica, we often say, it's kind of a joke, but it is a little raunchy, but we say, just because you didn't get any last night doesn't mean you should take it out on me, which basically it's because we're all Black. So there, it's not about a white person didn't serve me. It's like, well, maybe this person is just having a hard day. And so for me, giving grace has also mean that I don't then always question, is that something, why did that person say that? Why did that person do that? And is it because I'm not valued or they didn't see me? Because I think it was, what's her name that wrote, there's Dan Eins, We're Watching God, Zora Neale Hurston, who made that, who had that saying that said, that everybody, she wonders why people wouldn't want her in their company, because she's such an amazing person. I can't remember exactly how the quote goes, but something similar. I'll find it and put it in the chat box. But it really said to her, it really talked about her own value, her own intrinsic value, that she felt that everyone should want to be around her because she's so amazing. And so that's, I think, what you have to give yourself as a gift, is to not use other people as a point of reference for your value.
Thank you. This next question is for Jeanette. Jeanette, how did you make that shift from not being able to forgive to forgiving? Practically, how do you start to let go of the hurt and anger?
Well, for me, I am now just starting to talk about the things that I've experienced. I've internalized it whenever I experience. I never talked about it. I never mentioned it. I tried to forget it. But the thing is, the things that the sexual assaults, the rape, the abortion, all these things, they don't just go away. They don't just go away. They're in you. They're in your body. And so I never actually spoke about it until just recently. Until now, I'm actually just starting to celebrate it, because I didn't die. I am here. And so I can use that to motivate other people. But I internalized, and I told myself that it's just going to go away. Let me forget about it, But the truth is, you have to talk about it. You have to admit that it happened so that you can start your healing process. And you have to forgive yourself. And it's not an easy journey. It isn't. It really isn't. There are days where I just wake up and I just feel so tired. My body is tired. My mind is tired. My soul is tired. And I just cry. And I feel like I'm right back to where I was, But the journey really begins when you start loving yourself. Because I blamed myself for everything, even though I had no control over anything. I didn't choose for any of those things to happen. It happened. And I made the decision that I had to make in that moment for my sake. And so now I have to acknowledge that I made the right decision, and I have to comfort myself. And it isn't an easy journey picking yourself up. It really isn't. But, just understanding that you are more than anything. You're so worthy. You're so worthy. I'm so worthy. And I tell myself these things to remind myself of who I am. And a thing is, my heart is, I have a lot of scars on my heart, but I shouldn't allow my heart to be broken. And the scars that I have in my heart, they're just on badges. In the poem, I said, your scars are a badge of honor, so wear it with pride. I don't allow those things to tank me down, although sometimes I do feel defeated, but really I am not. It's just a state of mind, and my mind takes me there, but I have to remind myself that I have honor. I have so much pride in myself, and I'm so proud of how far I have come and how far I'm gonna go, and that I am a testimony. You just really have to, it's a self journey. This is a self-love journey. It's a battle you have to fight every day. You have to fight every day and remind yourself and tell yourself that you're worthy, that you're worth more than anything in this life. And so other people can do that for you, but if you don't do it yourself, it doesn't do you any good. You have to do it yourself. It's a battle that you have to fight every day, every day. And I can't tell you how you express it, but it comes naturally to everyone. Others do it through writing, others do it through singing, dancing, whatever your creativity is, you use that to express yourself, to let go and to release the hurt, the pain, and forgive people. The best advice my mom gave me was to forgive myself. That was the best advice she gave me. She told me I have to, every day, it's a prayer, it's a song your heart sings every day. You have to forgive yourself every day, every second of the day. Love myself and I forgive myself. I love myself and I forgive myself. I let go of everything, all the shame, all the pain. I let it go and I love myself in this moment and I accept myself. It's a song you sing every single day, every moment of your life. That's the best advice I can give you.
It's amazing advice. And in fact, we have a question. One of our attendees is wondering if you have shared those affirmations somewhere, or if they are written somewhere that they can look them up, or how would you direct someone who is trying to locate the affirmations that you were talking about today?
I have never actually shared them, but now I'm realizing how powerful they are. There's just information that I have them in my journal and I read them and I write them and I repeatedly say it so that my mind I can meditate on. It's a prayer, but I never actually publicly shared it, but I think I should because this is helpful. It's things that a lot of people need to just read and just remind themselves and to pick themselves up a little. And I think I'll share it. I will. Yeah.
Well, I know a number of folks will be looking forward to that.
Mm.
Absolutely. So one question with regards to the effects of the pandemic on mental health. With the COVID pandemic, the presence of that pandemic has certainly underscored the ways our nation's history of racism, bias, and discrimination are embedded in our health, social, and economic systems. You know, how can a community go about setting another course toward anti-racist and equitable outcomes?
So here's the thing, and I've been working on diversity issues for more than 30 years, and it started out with police shooting in Montreal back in 1988 when I was a grad student. Actually, I was an undergrad student, and I was doing an internship with Black Community Center in Côte-des-Neiges neighborhood in Montreal. And so after spending a lot of time, I mean, my first work was with a police department trying to build community police relations. And I have to say that, you know, when the word community, what does that mean? And part of what I work towards is that we all feel part of the human community, because there's some very fascinating studies that have been done on empathy. And it turns out that when we're very empathic to our own in-group, we tend to not feel as much for other people. And I think what we're missing right now in our culture is empathy, to understand where somebody else comes from. And it doesn't mean that you support their opinion. It doesn't mean that you agree with them. You might think that what they have to say is just out of here, but then how do you take some time to understand where did that perspective come from? Why did that happen? And I'm not saying that this is what people of color should do to understand white people. I'm not suggesting that. But what I am suggesting is that we have a more powerful sense of we instead of us and them. And I say that, you know, what is it in the Bible? I'm not a religious person, but, you know, how we treat the least of us is how we judge ourselves as a society. And so I think that inclusiveness in terms of power struggles, right? So if you think about people of color and people who are queer, people who are indigenous, that we all have the same struggles. And so the struggle to make Black lives matter is the same struggle to make indigenous lives matter. It's the same struggle to make gay lives matter. Why? Because once we start thinking about my little corner of the world, we forget to think about, wait, we're all part of this same oppressive system. And so I think understanding where we're all coming from, and that we all have different experiences just by virtue of our birth. My experience as a dark-skinned Black woman is going to be different from somebody who looks very white, because like I have a great niece, she could walk down the street, nobody would ever think she's a quarter Black. She's blonde, she's got green eyes, nobody knows where she got them from, but that's what she looks like. And so her experiences can be very different from mine, but at the same time we have a collective experience because she lives in a house full of Black people. And so understanding that if we can think about, again, focus on strengths. And I know it's a very social work thing to be strengths focused, but it is just who I am. I think I've always been just a positive person, which is kind of interesting because people think I'm also cynical, but I'm cynical in some ways, but in terms of who we are as people. And again, it's going to sound very California hippy dippy, but I believe that love always wins, and that if love can't beat hate, then what's love for? So I do believe that if we love ourselves, you know, as Jeanette was talking about, and in turn love each other and treat each other in a loving way and go through the world in a loving way. I remember I used to work as a teller, and I remember times when, you know, customers would come up and literally say like, you should go back to where you come from. And I would tell them, thank you. And I would just say next, very politely, very kindly. I'm not saying go, you know, whatever, but I just wouldn't put a lot of negative stuff in my space. And again, Jeanette was very good at sharing the way to think positively and all of that. I think if we come from a loving space, if we think about how am I going to love today, both myself and the people around me, am I going to smile? I'm going to say, I'm one of those crazy people. I walk a lot around Lake Merritt, which is this huge lake in Oakland. And I sometimes will just randomly, like today's Friday, when I go on my walk, I will, through my mask, say happy Friday to people. And people would just look at me and they're like, and then they would say happy Friday back or have a nice weekend. But I just randomly say it. I don't say it to everybody because it's crowded, but I will just pick people and I go, happy Friday, have a great weekend. And to me, it takes nothing for me to say it, but I love saying it and I love the reaction I get back. And so for me, it's a way of always making the space and the world around me a positive place to be. And I think if more of us feel that way about each other and about the vibe we want to bring, you know, give out in the world, that a lot of times we get it back. And even if we don't get it back from the person directly, we get it back in the universe. And so I think that that's one way. We can't really control other people, right? We can't control what other people do. We can only control what we do. And the way that we see the world is often the way we experience the world. And so I have chosen to see the world as a loving place. And I've traveled a lot alone in 5 continents. I just haven't been to Antarctica by myself yet. And that way of viewing the world has worked out for me. Now, I know I'm lucky. Nobody's attacked me. Nobody has stolen anything from me. I backpacked through Central America alone, and I go out at night. I do all of those things. But part of it is, yes, I have instincts. Yes, I mean, like I'm saying, I could, you know, experience some of the things that Jeanette has experienced, but I also like give that vibe out, and I share that with the world. And I think we all need to do that. I think especially now, like we really, really need some grace and some gratitude and kindness in the world. Again, we can't control anything, but we can control ourselves.
Absolutely. Well, we're at the end of our time for this morning's Talking Circle. Thank you, Jeanette, and thank you, Ruth, for spending this time with us this morning. It was just so wonderful to be here with you, and again to get this additional opportunity to hear some very, very wonderful advice. So thank you all. Namaste.